The consumption of meat and its derivatives is an important source of protein, which also provides vitamins and minerals that are essential for the proper functioning of the body. However, in recent years in Colombia, meat consumption has decreased. It is for this reason that Agrosavia in its research center La Libertad, located in Villavicencio, is developing a research which helps to determine the causes of this decline in consumption through sensory analysis in beef, which will improve the quality of it. Beef Quality Analysis Laboratory. We are currently in the Food Quality Unit, which is attached to the laboratory of the La Libertad Research Center. In this Food Quality Unit, we analyze the quality of meat and other foods such as milk or fruit. Today we are going to talk specifically about the quality of meat, especially beef. The information obtained from meat quality analysis is very important, not only for those of us who like meat, but also for producers, because by evaluating it we can identify the type of animals and the quality of meat being produced. And this is very important, because it allows us to design production strategies to meet the different needs of the meat markets, not only here in the region, but also in Colombia and eventually in the world, when Colombia can consolidate itself as a meat exporting country. Well, meat is definitely a staple product. It is a very important source of protein for food in Colombia and in the world in general. This food source has a high cost in general terms with respect to other sources of protein such as chicken or pork and competes. In recent years we have seen that the consumption of beef in Colombia has declined, progressively replaced by other sources of protein also of good quality such as chicken or pork. Therefore, it is necessary to begin to evaluate which are the factors that are influencing this decrease in consumption. Among other factors, we know that cattle breeders have animals adapted to the conditions of our tropical country, and that they produce very good quality meat. But we do not know exactly what characterizes this good quality meat. Therefore this type of laboratories, and the research that we develop in Agrosavia, are very important to define markets and to define specific products with quality criteria such as those that we evaluate here in the laboratory. They produce relatively young animals in some regions, others not so much, but in general the farmers know how to do their job and produce an animal of good quality for the market. However, within this process in which the animal leaves the farm and reaches the consumer, there are a series of intermediary stages that can be up to 7. And a very important one is the transport and handling of these animals before slaughter. At this point this link is very weak in our Colombian meat chain, because we have obsolete transport systems that do not adjust to the welfare conditions of the animals. And since they do not adjust to welfare conditions, the animals are not handled in an adequate manner. When these animals leave the farm they are subjected to permanent stress. When they are transported over long distances, often on roads that do not have the best conditions, and when they arrive at the slaughter plants, they arrive with a level of tension and stress so high that directly impacts the meat. This is a very important factor. The animal prior to slaughter must have adequate calm handling conditions that allow them to arrive with the least stress, because stress consumes much of the animal's energy, because an animal that is already fasting after leaving the farm consumes all its energy, which is deposited mainly in the muscles that will later be converted into meat. When this energy reserve is exhausted, it directly impacts the meat that will later be consumed by the consumer. The work we have been developing dates back to around 2006, when we began to evaluate animals in fattening processes here in the Eastern Plains and in other Agrosavia research centers in different parts of the country. Here in the Eastern Plains is one of the main livestock areas of Colombia, and we produce meat based on Indian or Zebu breeds with the Zebu, because it is an animal that is very well adapted to the environmental conditions and can withstand heat stress in these areas and more now, with aspects of climate change that has increased, but can also take advantage of the forage found in the area, mainly brachiareas. From that point of view, then we have an animal that is well adapted. But this breed, the Zebu breeds in general, because of their condition and genetic composition, tend to give meats a little harder than those of European breeds, like the Angus, or the Limousin or the Simmental, those pure European animals that I just mentioned. We cannot have them here in tropical conditions because they are not adapted. They were developed for other types of conditions and other production systems, and by having them here they are not going to produce in the same conditions. That is why our cattle breeding is based on animals adapted to tropical conditions. In that sense, what we have evaluated besides the Zebu, which is the majority breed in Colombia, the crosses that we can obtain through hybrid vigor between European and Indian breeds. Those hybrid or F1 products that we obtain from European breeds, or in our Colombian case, with Creole breeds that are also very important in crossbreeding with Zebu, allow us to improve many of those quality aspects that we are looking for and that do not have completely from those Zebu breeds. So we take from the Zebu breeds their adaptation to the environment, and those European breeds their product quality, and through the hybrid vigor we exploit those factors. We have an adapted animal with a quality product, and in fact the work we have done has shown that with hybridization through Creole European breeds we improve many aspects of quality. Among them a very important one, which is the hardness of the meat or tenderness. Here we evaluate the quality of the meat. That meat is obtained from experimental animals that we handle here in the research center under controlled conditions, but we also evaluate meat that comes from producers' farms. Those research animals or producers' animals are taken to the slaughtering processes in the meat processing plants that exist in the region. And after a time of about 48 hours, the cutting or deboning processes of the carcasses that result from those animals are carried out. The bovine carcasses are the meat basically with the bone and the fat of these animals that are taken for processing for the final consumer. Those animals and those carcasses that are deboned are later taken representative samples that are taken to the laboratory. We bring a representative sample that can be between a half kilo to a kilo, can be more, and in that sense depending on the tests that we need we make a processing. The first thing we do is that we receive the vacuum-packed sample. From there we are going to take some subsamples that we are going to bring to the cooling islands. We are going to place them in the trays in this way, and we are going to give them a waiting time of 20 minutes, so that as the samples arrive vacuum-packed we are going to give them time to oxygenate and for them to reach their color point to be able to make the instrumental color measurement. Here the first thing we have to do is to take the slice to our weight. We are going to weigh it. We are going to know exactly the weight we have of our slice. we are going to make sure that previously the cuts that we are going to make for our analysis correspond to a width of 3 centimeters. This weight that is taken here is going to be registered in a special format that later is going to be digitalized. Once this process is done, we go on to perform pH and temperature processes. Then when the potentiometer and the thermocouple will register the pH of the meat and will give us the temperature. At this moment, as they are in the cooling islands, we are going to register a temperature of 2 to 4 degrees Celsius. If we have some types of meat that are dark and pale and others that are light and exudative, it means that they are expressing a problem that has arisen due to stress or handling conditions at the time of slaughtering the animals. Next we will do the color analysis on the part that was exposed in the cooling island. For this we will use a colorimeter. In this case is portable, and it will allow us to make 2 types of readings. It will allow us to make a reading on the scale ELE to B, which allows us to measure the brightness and locate points between red and yellow, blue and green to know exactly what is the behavior or trend that our meat may have. In addition to this, he will take readings in wavelengths from 400 to 700 nanometers, and this will give us the spectral data, and we will have the comparative of how this trend or color distribution will be within our slice. It should be noted that in this case I do not know if it is observed and clarified that for this particular meat is very important the amount of marbling or fat streaks that will be tucked inside the muscle fibers. Likewise, it is going to be a reading in 4 points to ensure that we are going to have 100% of this sample goes to a tray that is going to be put in this convection oven. This oven is going to handle a constant amount of air flow in each one of these points, which has been previously verified. Here we are going to place our meat samples in trays, and we are going to follow up the temperature. Initially, when the sample enters the chamber, it will enter at 4 to 8 degrees Celsius. We make sure the oven temperature is going to be preheated to 100 degrees. We are going to wait for internally the slice to reach 35, and then we turn the slice and make sure it reaches 35 to complete at a final temperature of 70. Once it has left our cooking process, we give it a post-cooking time where we wait for a moment. We give it about 30 minutes so that the temperature lowers gradually, and then again we take the weight. We will have the comparative of the pre-cooking weight against the post-cooking weight. With this cylinder for each slice of meat we are going to take 6 cylinders. These cylinders are the ones that are going to be passed to the texturometer, which is the machine that is inside, which we are going to see next. In this machine we will be able to determine how tender or hard the meat is going to be, and it will give us graphs. In these graphs we will be able to determine and observe more clearly the presence of tendons that can be quite hard or soft, and also the characteristic of all these fat streaks. So we can say that we have here in the region a meat characterized from the instrumental sensory point of view as perceived by consumers and nutritional composition. This allows us to have a standard product to go to different markets. The region of the Eastern Plains is the main supplier of meat in the country. The main market is Bogota. 70% of the meat produced in the Eastern Plains goes to the Bogota market. There are about 1 million heads produced in this regional market of the Orinoquia, and 70% go to the consumption of other areas of the country, and mainly in Bogota, which has about 9 million inhabitants with its metropolitan area that are an important consumer to highlight. We have a very important challenge to meet the food security needs of this population with a quality product, but also to provide functional benefits, especially of these meats produced sustainably under grazing conditions in Colombia in general. We are going to talk a little more about not only the producer and the consumer. We have talked about the two extremes and we have talked about meat quality in the middle. But we are going to talk about a component that we are also working on now, which is the value chain. This value chain is basically all the links from the time the meat is produced on the farm until it reaches the consumer. We have mentioned the very critical aspect of transportation, but we have other links, which are the stockpilers, the intermediaries, the wholesalers, the marketers, the restaurant about meat quality. Applied the impact future projection since the demands for meat in the world are present every day. There is a very important bottleneck, which is that in the center of the chain are the wholesalers, who control both ends of the chain. They control the producers with the price and they control the consumers because they are the ones who will finally supply the market. They do not have the capacity to reach the consumer because they do not know what consumers want. And since they do not know what meat consumers want, what characteristics they want, what conditions they are not capable of supplying, in general, of the final price of the meat when you buy it in the store or supermarket. The producer acquires or takes from that final price about 30%, 70% or a little less, which goes to the whole chain of intermediation. So if we are working with them, we are working with them in the development of business models. Business models that allow them to know very well the markets they have available and that they can use what they have with their resources, with their animals, with their pastures, with what they have available for management, to be able to adjust their production to reach different market segments. Many times we think that we only have to produce premium meat, but definitely, and a word that happens to us, for example, in those producing areas as it is called in the East, that the highest consumption of meat that we have here in the regions is of females, and that is because most of the male cattle that is of better quality goes to the market of Bogota because it pays better. So trying to organize the production of the farm for what the markets require and for what the consumers are demanding. We are working with them, and through that, we work through our technological offer. You have already been able to see some of the activities that we develop in the research center. Among them, the genetic improvement part. That genetic improvement has been oriented to produce better quality animals for the market. In this case, the meat market, but we also have management strategies through offers to, for example, provide good feeding with grazing, that is, grazing management systems, or integrated pasture systems with trees through silvopastoral systems that improve the welfare of the animals and therefore will produce animals in better conditions. All these strategies, in addition to animal welfare and management aspects of the livestock company, are elements that we are providing to producers through the technological offer we are generating, with the purpose of reducing slaughter. To go from those 39 months, the average that we have animals slaughtered around 30 months. There are already producers that do it even less than 24 months here in grazing conditions and supplementation, and another to improve the quality of the meat for all the segment of the population, whether they consume meat mainly from females or males, whether the population of Villavicencio or Bogota. This through a better knowledge of the markets and through really knowing what the consumers want. In recent years we have seen how the livestock inventory throughout the country has increased as a result of the peace agreement. It was possible to reach many areas that were not reached before, and we went from almost 23 million in the last 5 years to almost 28 million. That is to say, it has increased. Colombia continues to be a livestock-producing country. The tropical regions of the world, including Colombia, are regions that are going to supply the growing demand for meat that will be seen. By the middle of the century, by the year 2050, it is thought that this demand will grow, and the tropical areas, including Colombia, are the areas that will supply this meat in the world, not only meat of bovine origin but also other sources of protein. Especially in our tropical conditions, we are going to produce meat based on our locally adapted genetic groups, the Indian breeds but also the European breeds, especially our Creole cattle and all the breeds that we have available through hybridization mainly in the warm zones of the country. We are also going to produce meat based on grazing, and it is a meat that is going to produce some characteristics that we have already mentioned in terms of meat composition that are beneficial for the consumer. Very important is that this meat is going to be produced with animal welfare standards. A key point that consumers are already thinking about in a very important way, and they demand meats that are produced with properly managed. Meat will continue to be one of the most important food sources, especially because it is a nutritious food. It is a source of very high-quality proteins, and very few foods compare with the quality of the animal protein source that meat has in general. But it is also a source of minerals, zinc, iron and vitamins that are very important for the population, not only to maintain food security, but also for health. And meat will be a food that will supply these needs in part within a balanced diet. The other point that has to be developed is that all meat produced must come from sustainable livestock systems that do not go against ecosystems, and that improve the impact on the emission of greenhouse gases and contribute to reduce climate change in the world. From this point of view, if livestock farming can be accommodated, it has a much better future projection, since the demands for meat in the world are present every day.